I'll tell you, I think the initial introduction, I was just skeptical. I was bummed. I thought it wasn't a fit for me. I thought I didn't really have the knowledge around what is VR, what is, the metaverse and technology. So I walked away. It's like, man, maybe one day. I sent you guys like a referral of a couple of people that I thought was a fit. I think eventually, maybe like 6 months later, I got another heads up from Michael Fuller, who is one of the Twitter community orienting guys. So that's when I reached out the second time. And man, dude, I'm so glad that I did have that follow conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. I'm your host, Christian Ulstrup. My guest today is Edvardo Archer. He goes by Eddie. Eddie is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over a decade of experience and a private practice in Florida. When he is not working with people, he is in his garage sanding down coffee tables. Eddie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Christian. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate you, man. Appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So I thought it would be a good place to start to share how we actually connected in the first place.
Sure.
Because this is our first time meeting face to face, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
And I think it originally started on Twitter.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into that in a second. I think it's easy to bash social media, but there are times where it actually can be a medium for creating connections, which are valuable. And then we've also met in virtual reality, which, if I remember correctly, you were a little bit skeptical at the beginning, I think for good reason, and have subsequently now been using VR to connect with your clients. So
right.
we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
So very nice to see you face to face. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Sure thing.
Just to dive in to kind of Twitter and social media, you are quite prolific on therapist Twitter. In fact, I think you have probably the most popular Twitter thread on the use of virtual reality in psychotherapy. I'd have to check, but I think that's the case in terms of likes and everything else. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I had no idea.
How do you use social media?
Yeah.
How do you use Twitter?
Yeah. I think what I appreciate about some of these things, I'll say Twitter specifically, is you go at the pace of relationships if you are doing it right, and so that is fascinating to hear that the tweet thread that I sent out, and I'm sure you'll link in and share it, with this podcast, but I had no idea the impact of it, but I do know, and I realize the conversations that are now happening around it, and just how many people are inspired about the idea of therapy in a metaverse. But generally speaking, in terms of social media, how I use it, and right now, I think you highlighted it well. It's been a way of connection in therapy, Twitter, right? Connecting with other therapists, connecting with other people that have the same mission in mind. And there's a couple reasons why, I've really been drawn to that. I'd say primarily, man, being a therapist is a super lonely experience. You're there and you're present and available for your clients. You're walking through a lot of people through their toughest moments in life. But what you don't get unless you actually work at it is community, is a sense of connection with people that get you. And it opens up the opportunity to be ugly, without consequences. It opens up the opportunity to, address our own imposter syndrome. But really, I think one of the things that I have really been looking for, and I find in Twitter and other social media, is learning missions and learning things to devote myself outside of my local environment, my private practice, my four walls. Being able to be a part of an ongoing conversation that is more global is super encouraging. And dude, people are amazing. And I think I'm grateful for some of the relationships that has come out of those conversations.
I'd never really thought about it that way. It can, yeah, it must be quite lonely. Like, I mean, the therapist profession, right? You're mostly doing one-on-one with clients. Maybe you do groups, but you're kind of on your own for the most part, unless I guess maybe you have a consultation group or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And obviously there are like the traditional routes of joining in with a consultation group, a mastermind group. There are also chapters in your license and that meet regularly. But all of those efforts are very effortful. They all have, very specific windows of access. But what it doesn't necessarily do a great job at is walking alongside, in your life, right? As you're going through it, as you're digging in, learning things, but also, as you're exploring and you're continuing to grow and learn as an individual, the opportunity that social media creates is a real-time point of connection, for other therapists to say, hey, this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm noticing. Like, what do you think? Like, where's your mind at? And of course, the feedback and the conversations take on a life of their own. And that's always awesome.
I love that. So it's like, if you set up the environment correctly, and that's something I'd love to dig into, then you can get access to this. It's almost like this living organism.
Yeah, that's right.
Just kind of the conversations that are happening. It's serendipitous, and it doesn't require the same amount of effort that it would to, set up a group or something.
Yeah,
very interesting.
I agree.
Now, you kind of alluded to this, but it's like, with having such a frictionless experience and being able to step into that stream, there's a lot of good.
Yeah.
But there can also be a lot of, content that maybe doesn't make you feel so good.
Yes.
So in your experience with social media, just personally, how do you, set up those parameters, or are there any habits that you have to make sure that you don't get pulled into, a direction you don't want to go in?
Totally. I think, one, let me just say that some of the tweets that you've been sharing, Christian, has been like really, they've created a lot of thought. I mean, some things you shared along the lines of that this era that we live in is so content rich that it's overwhelming. It can be suffocating. And so I would say, like, a platform like Twitter, it gives you the tools so that you can decrease the noise. And I think that's one of the key things entering an environment like that. You have to start with cutting things off. You have to start off with like lowering your following list. People that you're actually following, like, just cut that by a third or even more than that. You also have to really capitalize on tools like creating lists. So one of the things that I do personally is I through the interactions and conversations, I've come across people that I want to continue to invest in their work. Like, I want to know what they're doing. I want to have conversations about things that they bring up. So I created a list called like my minimum viable like list of people. And it's a list of maybe like 15 people, 20 people that come off. And sometimes I take people off, but sometimes they come on and sometimes they're off. But essentially, if I touch social media, I'm just looking at that list, and interacting with that small group of 20, 15 people. And then of course, if I'm up for it, I'll go in and go on my, my front page and just see what's going on generally. But one of the key things is just that internal commitment, to keep your world, small. And I'll say that, man, there are definitely negative noises. One of the things that I've learned, especially with some of the tweet threads that I sent out, is that there are very few people that I call them therapists who hate therapists. There are very few of them, but they're loud. They're loud. And I think one of the things that you just have to be postured for is just being willing to say, hey, I'm blocking, access, just because I choose my freedom over the fear of these few loud people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like in real life, good relationships start with healthy boundaries.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
That makes sense. That's I recently discovered the mute button
Yeah.
I've been maybe a little self-conscious about like, blocking or even unfollowing. So I've been using that pretty judiciously.
Yeah. That's a smart thing.
There is that option as well.
Yeah.
So the name of the podcast is Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. So we like to talk about tech and mental health. It's something that I think is increasingly top of mind for really everyone. I don't think there's anybody who's been through COVID who doesn't at least have a family member or a friend who's struggled as a consequence of being isolated, being inside. There's all these changes going on, political environment, media environment, everything else. Yeah. And so to that end, you are really on the front lines, right? So you're seeing things as they happen and they evolve before they reach the mainstream media. What do you think right now is a topic when it comes to mental health that is not getting enough attention?
Yeah, I'll say, generally speaking, and this is one of the trends that I'm seeing in the general population. Of course, like I'd love for us to also touch base on youth, right? In mental health, but generally speaking, one of the things that I'm noticing is this trend of us just working extremely hard right now. It's almost as if after COVID, people are working to make up for time, or what happened is during COVID, we had to take enough of a break and pause that now we're actually noticing how hard we've been working, and how hard we're going. And so it's the constant conversation I'm having with clients in my office is this idea of not taking information that your mood and mental state is trying to give you. Because what's happening is we're chasing and we're running, and all the while, what's paying the price for all of that is our mental well-being. What's paying the price is our emotional capacity and ability. Like we're beginning to run on fumes. So I've been talking a lot about mood and mental state. I've been working on and developing this concept called mood first productivity. And it's this idea of instead of starting with your to-do list of everything you have to do in that day, especially in the moments where you get lost or the moments where you need to get started for the day, tune into what your mood and your mental state is saying. If I can learn, hey, right now, I have a lot of energy, and my mood and how I'm feeling right now is good, then it'll help me understand right now is a great time to do some writing, to share something. Right now is a great time to get with people and just live inside of that space. And if you follow that momentum, you can kind of find yourself in a state of flow, but also really respect the flows, the ebb and flows of who you are, how you're feeling authentically in any given moment.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And that's hits home for me too, because I'm thinking about, there is something about capitalizing on that kind of serendipitous, emotional energy. Mm-hmm. If, Twitter, sometimes you just something pops into your head and you're like, that's a banger. You gotta send that. Or, create some content or work on the business or, have a good call or something like that.
Right.
Whereas it's very easy because you can be plugged in all the time. And my co-founders and I think struggle with this, is not creating perhaps the space necessary to let those serendipitous moments arise.
Yeah.
You can just be plugged in all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right on. And I think that is, I think that's where the slippery slope happens for us, where we find ourselves at a point where it's I don't know how I lost control of all of it. All I know is I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And then we have to go through the restoration process of just kind of picking up the pieces, noticing, what our needs are in that given moment, responding to and caring for that part of our lives, our emotional life, our mental space. And so it's been I've been really running hard about writing about this idea. And I'm currently putting together a Skillshare class on hey, this is how you can build this kind of platform to start with your mood and your with your mood and your mental space, and let that naturally flow into the options of what would best complement where you're at, you know, and kind of live in the moment as opposed to forcing my mood and my mental state to do, I got to get this checklist done. I don't care how I feel right now. I've got to force it through. Anyways, it's one of those things where I'm working on it, but I'm also looking forward to bringing community alongside it, to continue to discuss it, to unpack it, and figure out more of, you know, what does this mean? What does it look like?
I look forward to checking that out once it's published.
Yeah.
Just so people can get like a little preview, a little taste. What's one practical tip if you're worried about being a little too plugged in, you know, feeling maybe not burned out, but afraid that could be something in your future? What's one practical thing you can do right now?
Yeah. I think one of the key things that you can do right now is actually take a pause and fill that pause in with awareness, right? I usually ask myself those two questions, like, how am I feeling right now? And like, where's my energy at? And I think what we're really just tugging on right now, Christian, is the idea of self-reflection. Really the only way that we can be honest with ourselves, right? And be authentic in any given moment is that moment where I can sit down and see myself, but also draw from the intelligence that my body's trying to give me, that my mindset or my mood is trying to give me. And so that last question is, well, it's just that. I mean, you've paused, you've asked, like, where's my mood? Where's my energy? And then the last question is like, hey, what is my body trying to tell me right now? Like, what do I need right now? And so, I think that's it. It takes audacity. It takes a bit of like a craziness to actually answer that question. What does my body need right now? Because it kind of requires you to dream. It requires you to kind of like put everything else on pause that you probably have to do or required or responsible for. And you have to kind of dream a little bit on, like, if I were to really address this, this is what I would need. But I think as soon as we allow ourselves to acknowledge that, it gives us the opportunity, the option to make a decision, right? To take a baby step, to do something that's actually meaningful for where I am in that given moment. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think your point too about really getting in touch with your body is something that no matter how many times I hear it, I think it's just so underrated. And this, you know, connect us to the technology point a little bit, we'll get into is like, in the modern world, so much of what we do is kind of knowledge work based, or it's, you know, it's very easy to get in your own sort of like stuck in your own head. And then you're not paying attention to all these signals that are, you know, it's like you said, your body's trying to tell you something, you know, pay attention to it. And so figuring out how to get people to kind of return to their bodies, like, you know, unplugging from the screen, like having more of a somatic experience. That makes a ton of sense.
Cool.
Now on the, you know, probably a good segue into the technology point. Tech, youth, mental health. Again, you're on the front lines. Really curious to hear what you've been seeing, you know, in your clients at the intersection of those things, both the challenges as well as maybe things that are going well.
Yeah, I think, well, I've had the privilege of speaking to a couple schools, and speaking to like high school classes, middle school classes. And so it's been interesting hearing the request that comes from the counseling centers at these schools, which has been one, like, fundamental knowledge and awareness of like, what is mental health? What is actually, you know, happening. And so the conversation has kind of, you know, around that, and some of what I've shared has had to unpack the role of technology, and what it plays with our mental health. I think the encouraging part of it is that, our young people, are utilizing technology in ways that my generation, you know, not completely aware of, right? It's like they've created like genuine communities, right? Like real connection. Social life literally isn't just what happens in the physical world, but social life is also very much what happens in social media, in the social world. And what that means is what it does is garners connection, close connection to peers, to friend groups, at all times. And what that does is creating like a stable base, is creating confidence, for our young people. They're learning, exploring. I think all of those things are positive, and we'll continue to see that as positive. The negative aspect of that is like any too much of anything turns the other way. And that essentially is what's happening, is too much of the online world. And it's so easy. Just the bullying, and some of the, experiences that our young people are having, just online. One of the, interesting pieces of research I saw about bullying, I forgot the reference of this, but one of the things that they found out, I believe it was a university up in Norway, they found out that bullying actually happens more within a person's friend group. It's not an external person that's bullying. Bullying is happening inside of a friend group. And it's usually happening because one friend is looking to have more of a social standing above another friend. So they'll kind of bully them and be egged on by the friend group and so on and so forth. And you realize that for young people, what they're dealing with, what they're facing online is the bullying that's coming from inside, like from the groups that they see as friends. It's just spiraling, and it's creating tons of issues on the other end, for a sense of confidence. Again, like breaking that down again, for a sense of stability, loyalty to what social life and holding social life together.
I want to dig into this a little bit, because I think what you just described actually is counter to a lot of, I don't know, I would say like traditional, the internet's been around for like 20 years, right? But like traditional wisdom around interactions with people online. I remember growing up, it was sort of like, don't talk to strangers on the internet, right? Like the danger is the stranger.
Yeah.
Whereas, what I'm hearing and kind of what I've heard elsewhere is technology, social media can act as this like accelerant of toxic stuff that's happening maybe offline in that immediate group.
Yes.
Where back in the day, if you were getting bullied at school, you could come home, you could, sort of disconnect from it.
Yeah.
But if you're on Instagram or whatever it is and you're getting dunked on by classmates, you can't get away.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it sounds like that is, a big problem. And I would imagine then on the flip side, if you're able to meet strangers essentially, but other people online who are perhaps, more similar to you in certain ways, or, you're not having that bullying kind of relationship, then maybe even meeting strangers online in the right circumstances, being careful, like maybe that could even be a good thing.
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, what other tool gives us the opportunity to niche down, so deeply into areas of our personal interest, areas of exploration. And I think we all, and our young people, have such a great opportunity to go deep, in exploring things, and to be surrounded by community. And oftentimes in niche communities, where strangers come in and they're interested, most of them are not toxic. Like most people want to walk alongside a newcomer and tutor them and give them like, hey, you interested in keyboards? Like, let me walk you through it. You're interested in pens or whatever it is. We have that opportunity now, but again, we're realizing that most of the bullying, most of the terror, toxicity is coming from inside of the friend group, not necessarily, strangers as we're exploring things. Obviously, we still have to be careful with all that. There's no doubt. But yeah, man, it is interesting.
If, let's say, there's a parent who has a kid who's dealing with some degree of cyberbullying in the way you described it, something going on kind of in their school environment, and, would be open to the idea of their child finding other relationships maybe online. I think a lot of parents probably makes them kind of uncomfortable because that's, sort of like we talked about before, it's like stranger danger. It doesn't seem right. I guess what's a first step that a parent could take to, be involved in their kid's life, or have them do this in kind of a healthy way where they can develop those healthy relationships online?
Yeah. I think I do think that there is always the opportunity for parents to do kind of front end work, but just social engineering, doing the legwork, finding the specific communities, reading reviews, like jumping in to see, well, what's good fit. I do think that, especially as our kids get older, one of the things to focus on is a collaborative process of exploration, where it's parents are searching and the child is searching, and together we're coming together, we're thinking through, hey, here's pros and cons, here are ideas, that we're bringing on. Really giving the child a voice gives them a sense of agency and really increases their buy-in on that community, on that process, as they're working towards. So I say those things are empowering. And of course, the post like effort that parents can do to support, is to invite and to be open to feedback in conversations here. I think a lot of parents are just kind of annoyed by online stuff because they don't get it. And they're watching their kids watch like, videos of watching people play video games. And it's like, I don't get it. None of this makes sense. But I'm telling you, if you were to create an environment or a space where your child could come in and debrief with you or just talk with you, like, hey, let me tell you what just happened in that video. And then, he did this, and then this is what happened. It garners security, it garners safety. It takes away the shame of their exploration outside of you, and it reinforces it. So being able to sit down with your child, and just kind of learn about what they're learning, be interested about the interesting, niche, weird thing that they're looking into or exploring. And I'll tell you that actually does add something to the effort to help them heal or to help them find the right community.
I love that. So having some humble inquiry when it comes to Twitch streamers, maybe there's something there, just taking an interest in what your kid's interested in and exploring that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's a great piece of advice. Now when it comes to using technology, for good, for improving mental health, you've been using the Virgils virtual reality platform with a few of your clients.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I do seem to remember you were a little skeptical when we met in there the first time. And that's often been the case, especially when we started. I would love to hear, what sort of changed for you and what it's been like subsequently using that in clinical practice.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I think, the initial introduction, I was just skeptical. I was bummed. I thought it wasn't a fit for me. I thought that for a couple of reasons. I thought I didn't really have the knowledge around what is VR, what is, the metaverse and technology. I didn't really understand how those pieces couldn't work together and play together with the therapy. And I thought that the opportunity to be a therapist utilizing VR, was, I thought it was for a very specific population and for a very specific need. So I walked away. It's like, man, maybe one day, I sent you guys like a referral of a couple of people that I thought was a fit. I think eventually, maybe like 6 months later, I got another heads up from Michael Fuller, who is one of the Twitter community orienting guys for therapists. Well, he kind of brought it back up in my scope, and I didn't realize that, hey, this is still happening, and it sounded more open. So that's when I reached out the second time, and yeah, man, wanted to get started. And man, dude, I'm so glad that I did have that follow conversation. I think being able to see, Christian, how how you and your team, right? Becco and some of the other guys, you guys genuinely get it. You know, I feel like you get the need. You see us as therapists, and man, I got to tell you, I feel like, especially during COVID and after, there's been so much effort from the tech world to put therapists in a farm and to milk us, you know, for the minimum amount of income, you know, and to maximize the output. And look, and that's all good because, you know, people that can't afford services in a private practice need services like Talkspace and Better Together. But the fact that you guys came and approached this thing as, hey, we're giving you a tool, and you use a tool and shape it around what you naturally and normally do. Dude, that's so inspiring. And of course, I mean, being able to touch base with you guys, so you guys are human beings and genuinely like you care. That has also meant a lot, and making me want to dig in, and really feel free to shape this tool around the work that I do in my community, you know?
Makes me very happy to hear that. I think, on that point, it's like there are a few different philosophies, I think, when it comes to technology and especially software in terms of what the purpose is. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of go the approach of sort of like cost cutting, like trying to make things more efficient. And there's a place for that for sure. But at least what gets us really excited is this idea of you create like a brand new tool and you give it to an expert, and somebody who's like creative, they'll do something that was never possible before. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of like, you know, 0 to 1 sort of moments, or at least that's what gets us really excited. So I'm very glad to hear that. To that end, you've been experimenting with clients and learning stuff and using the platform based on the Twitter thread in ways that we didn't even anticipate. So would love to hear about that. What's it been like meeting clients in VR?
Yeah. So it's been genuinely fascinating. Why? Because one of the first populations that I've been tying this into are the individuals that I currently work with, maybe online or in my office. And I asked them to try this out because one of the things that I've noticed is that I found that they had a specific challenge with jumping through the social norm and rules, hoop, so that we can get beyond just that dance of performing well in person, and get down to like, why we're here and what we can discuss. So social anxiety, people that have a really hard time thinking quick, and being on their toes, but need to process. So in terms of clients, I found how it's been so great because, I've had one session where I started on the video just to introduce and talk, and it was a struggle, man. It was like, what are we doing? And then I switched over to the VR space and boom, opened right up, and we're talking, we're engaging, we're walking through a trail, we're listening to a waterfall, and more importantly, man, we're getting to the core of their need, inside of that conversation. I can now even more precisely lead them through a journey of reflection, of awareness of themselves, awareness of the process, right? Simply because they no longer had to worry about performing for me. That was no longer a need. They actually had the opportunity to be genuinely themselves. And I so appreciate that. I think that was one thing, one of the things that's been amazing as well, is play. It's almost like, I had one client who had and has dealt with like really significant hardship, with a parent. I mean, it's borderline abuse, right? And they've had to carry this burden. And it's hard to talk about that. It's hard to give updates on how they're processing and talking through it. But there's something amazing about standing inside of a virtual room and them playing tic-tac-toe with me on a boulder while we talk through these really difficult and hard experiences. And I think that's a key thing with play. It disarms fear. It takes away that need to protect and need to hide. And play allows you to be completely present in the moment. I think that's been also a very huge like impact on some of my clients, given that ability to express and to process that way.
I'm curious, have you like switched between different media, like got, VR sometimes, and then maybe go to teletherapy and maybe even in person? How do you think about selecting the right tool?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, man, because it actually addresses like another key reason why I'm really appreciating the software. Is because what it allows for me as a therapist, it gives me the opportunity to reserve more energy. I feel like my cup is more full when I'm in the VR space as opposed to Zoom. Well, not Zoom, but any like video conferencing, Google Meet, or it's just draining. It's just completely draining to try to talk to this 2D person on a video telehealth session. But being inside of a 3D VR space, for some reason, gives me something a little bit closer to being in the office. And even then gives me a little bit more energy than being in the office because I can relax myself. So the two different medias, I've done both a browser, and have opened up and led session browser based as well as my client. I've also done with a VR headset, and have actually been in the room. What I would look, I'd say the VR headset's a game changer. Like legit, you go in and you're actually there physically inside of the VR space, the therapy room. And we often skip through scenes, while we're meeting. So the immersive experience definitely does pour back in to me. I think the other key thing with the VR headset is that it gives me like a streamlined focus in any given moment. As I'm meeting with a client, like all of my attention is what's happening right then and there with them. Now the pros on the browser, I like that too, because what it does is it does give me confidence, I don't have to skip around on the technology and just make sure things work as opposed to the headset. Everything is right there, and simple. I do think, one of my clients said this. One of my clients said that jumping onto the browser experience and using it felt like they were playing Fortnite. It felt like they were playing Roblox, one of their games, because the controls are the same. Like the opportunity to walk around and explore different spaces, again, really helped with that sense of play for my client as well. Yeah, man.
I totally vibe with that. I actually, if I was like 12 years old, my parents asked me to go meet a therapist and especially do, sort of this like face-to-face thing over Zoom.
Yeah.
That would just be a huge challenge. And so the idea of going into a video game world, right, which is probably where they want to go anyway.
Yeah.
Easy to reach for a game controller. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the energy and attention thing, actually, that was something that I kind of figured out by accident almost a year ago, where we decided, hey, okay, there's this idea of dog fooding in like tech startups. It's like, will the dogs eat the dog food? So you have to just use your product yourself as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And I made a commitment about a year ago where I was like, I'm going to take 90% of my meetings in our platform in VR with the headset with strangers. And that was how you and I.
Yeah, that's right.
And what was really unexpected was how energized I felt. Because thinking about it before, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to spend, 4-6 hours a day in a headset meeting with people. And it's going to be this terrible thing, but I got to do it and push through. But I found the opposite happened, which was very interesting, which is, I don't know if this has to do with feeling more connected to your body, because you're like, I'm moving around in space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Able to be a lot more expressive, or, I don't know. I don't think there's been much research into this, or at least not that I've seen. but there is something that happens with the immersive experience where it feels less exhausting than Zoom. So
Yeah.
I don't know, more work to do there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think around all of this, there's more work and research, and already seeing a lot of good bits and pieces. Again, from Twitter, right? People just saying, "Hey, here's some papers," and it's hopeful. It's hopeful that this becomes a platform to really open up things that we weren't able to do before, and healing.
Absolutely, yeah, doing new things. Lots of questions to try to get answers to. Experimentation with innovative experts like yourself. We're very lucky to be able to work with you. And shout out to Michael Fulweiler for putting us back in touch.
Yeah, right on.
He's great on Twitter. You should follow him for sure. Eddie, you got a few irons in the fire. I want to ask you, first of all, where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, right on. I'd say, you can definitely connect with me via Twitter, and that's at Edvardo Archer. And yeah, I'd love to welcome you and connect with you, keep the conversation going for sure.
Fantastic. And your website is edvardoarcher.com.
That's right.
And I'll include all this in the show notes
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I would encourage, you're right. I definitely have a number of things that I have cooking, just because, I definitely genuinely believe in following my play and passion, right? Following the things that inspire me. But I do a bi-weekly newsletter where I cover three things. It's called Achieve, Heal, and Discover. And so it's just a quick blurb on, hey, this is something that'll help you achieve this week. This is something that'll help you heal this week. And here's something that I'm discovering, and learning. And so it's kind of like, hey, come learn with me. And of course, people can jump on that. It's newsletter.edvardoarcher.com.
Yeah, perfect. I'm gonna go sign up for that right now.
Nice.
So three spots: at Edvardo Archer on Twitter. That's your website, edvardoarcher.com, and then make sure to sign up for your new newsletter.edvardoarcher.com. And then I have to ask, are you taking clients right now in Florida?
I am. Yes.
Cool. All right. And that's just in Florida?
Just in Florida right now. Right.
Perfect. Cool. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. We got to do this again soon.
Yeah, man.
Really enjoyed the conversation. And I think lots of insight and learning in the months ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Christian.